All right, are we ready to get started? All right, let's begin with a word of prayer. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this beautiful day, for the gift of the fall colors and the gift of seasons that we get to enjoy every single year. Lord, I pray that you would bless the conversation today, that you would be present, that we would be challenged, that we would hear your voice, that at the same time we would be spiritually edified and get practical advice from this presentation today. God, I thank you for all of your many, many gifts, and I pray that we would all leave here more in tune to you and your desires than when we came. And we pray, amen. All right, so first off, how many of you all know Julia? All right. Can I actually get you to start out up here with me and then introduce yourself? We'll do that, and then I'm going to talk for the first 15 minutes, and then she's going to cover the rest. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Eric Vinsel. I'm mostly known for robotics. I work, full-time for Cisco, but then at the same time, I volunteer full-time at Second Pres. So it's a great set of two jobs.
And I'm Julia Davis. I'm an attorney in town. I've been practicing since 2003, and I've been a member of this church for a very long time. You haven't seen my face for a while, so I'm glad to be back.
Great, thank you. All right, so as you guys know, I haven't really had a lot of time to be teaching as much as I'd like because I've been focused on robotics, but when I saw an exciting topic like dead and dying, I thought I have to take it. So made sure to sign up. And what I want us to be thinking about is not just the practical matters of a will and living will and funeral plans, as enchanting and as exciting as that is, but I want us to also realize that these are theological documents. Right? And so many of us think that this is just a practical matter I have to take care of, and preferably I'm going to take care of it later because I'm not going to die for a very, very long time. But as all of us know, death sneaks up on all of us, and unfortunately not usually when we planned for it. So the question is, do you have those practical documents in place? And when you wrote them, did you write them in a theological way, understanding the importance of what these documents really mean and the opportunity that they give you? So as all of us know, our beliefs don't always equal our actions. Too often we believe one thing, but we do another thing. One of my favorite sayings is that hypocrisy is an important moral tool. And what that means is when you quit being a hypocrite, that usually means you've quit even trying to be good. Right? So the fact that you're a hypocrite at least means you're still trying, and that is so very, very important. And likewise, as the church, then, our job is to be hypocrites and regularly look at our actions and go, well, this is what I believe, but this is what I'm actually doing. So similarly, one of the exercises that I want us to do, and again, this isn't just about wills, this isn't just about end-of-life plans, this is about being Christians or hypocrites who are trying to be better people. You need to first think about what is it that really matters to you and then compare that to what you're actually doing. So one of the things I love to do, and my wife and I actually do this regularly, is we have to do an audit of where are we spending our time, where are we spending our money, and where are we spending our energy, and do they align with what we actually believe? And I love this quote, right? Your schedule and your checkbook are the best indicators of what is truly important to you. Now, this may feel like a sales pitch where I'm about to tell you, church is pretty important, isn't it? But does your checkbook and time reflect it? But actually, it's not just that. It's also working the other way. So this is a little bit of a confession for you. I realized, and this is serious, I'm volunteering about 30 hours a week at the church, plus I'm working 50 hours a week. Guess who's not getting my time? My family. Right? And I would tell you that my family is my number one priority, but what does my time actually say? My time says they're number 3 or 4 on the list. That's got to change. And so I have been changing what I'm doing at work. I am working on pulling back a little bit at church. So again, this isn't just a message of, I want you all to do more at church. Please hear that. But you should be asking yourself, are you giving church the priority that you think it deserves? Are you giving your family the priority it deserves? Or any other number of topics. Some of us here care deeply about the environment. Some of us here care very deeply about insert political party, don't tell me which, please. Some of us care about all these other issues that the question is your time and is your money lined up with what you're saying is important to you? And then your will should naturally reflect that as well. But if you're not doing it now, don't think you're going to make it right in your will. You should be doing it now, and then your will should reflect that later. Does that make sense? So, step one, you don't have to actually do this now, but what I do want you to do is between this week and next week, seriously talk about this with your spouse, hopefully, your kids or whoever else, or just even by yourself. Write down what is most important to you. And again, this is sort of broad, but think about it. Is it family? Is that number one? Is it church? Is it your alma mater that's really important to you? Is it the environment? Is it helping alleviate poverty? Is it any number of issues? Have you actually thought about what is that top 5 list that's most important to you? And then what I want you to do very seriously, and this is about now, review your calendar and your checkbook. Are they aligned? Do those reflect what you say are your top priorities? And if they're not, then it's time to here and now start changing those behaviors. And then we can move into, and especially next week, now talking about that will, talking about a funeral service, talking about a tombstone and burial, and figure out how do I make sure that those things reflect what are important to me. Does this make sense? So what we were worried about was with this class, we were going to go straight into here's a will and here's how to fill it out. But if we didn't spend the time to make clear that this is a theological document, that this is something we need to be reflecting on, I think it would have been a mistake. So I wanted to start there. I also want to reframe some of these documents just a little bit for us, where, again, our actions should reflect our beliefs. And the will that you write is your last act, right? When you pass away, this is the last concrete action you get to make. And you literally get to make it from the other side, because once you pass is when it happens, right? So it's so important that you make sure that that document reflects what is really important to you. Is there one kid that you are ready to not give anything to, and you want that to be your last act? Fine, this is your chance to do it. If you want it spread equally between all of your kids, great. If you want none of it to go to them and you want it to go to the Salvation Army, that's fine. This is your chance to do one last action, and you should really think about it in that way. Second, the funeral service. I can't tell you how many families I've worked with on funerals, and the kids are at a complete and total loss at what to do. They're like, I don't know what quotes mom would have wanted. I don't know what Bible passages dad cared about. I don't know what hymns to pick. And by the way, there's usually one kid who did all the work for the last 5 years as they were nearing death. The other 2 kids are on the other side of the country, but for some reason, now the 2 kids who haven't been here for 10 years have the strongest opinions about what mom and dad would have wanted. And what happens now is there's all this resentment because the person who had those conversations and knew that mom changed the last 5 years is feeling railroaded by the people who weren't there, and now all of these feelings rise up in the midst of grief. The reason I bring that up is your last act may be throwing a hand grenade to your kids and making sure they never speak again. How often does that happen? And how many of you can think of a concrete example of a family where after somebody died, they never talked again? Don't let that be your last act. Don't let that be your last act. Write a will that's thoughtful, that understands what your priorities are, and to whatever degree you can help your kids with that funeral service, is the degree which you have defused a nuclear bomb about to go off between some of your kids, right? And then same thing with tombstone and burial. There's a lot to unpack there. We're not going to go in depth into that, but think about it. Even those little decisions about what sort of little imagery you want on your tombstone, if you're going to even have a tombstone. I'll tell you right now, I'm collecting urns in my basement. I think I've got 6 of them now, right? Because people pass away, they didn't have a burial plot, so one of the family members has to take it. At some point, I'm going to be investing in a nearby, funeral home because I'm going to have to take out 6 plots to bury them. But the point is, you need to think about that step too. What do you want there? And to the degree that you can think through that for your kids and say, this is what I would have wanted, it's going to be a real help when they're in the midst of grief at your passing. A few common myths. We're not going to go in these into too much depth, but I'm too young to need a will. I can just tell my family my wishes. What do I care? I'll be gone. My kids can figure it out. I've heard all of those things, by the way. Those were real quotes. The first one, I do think this is important, and again, this is scriptural, James 2:26. As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. I want you to think about this as your last act. That is not something you want to abdicate and not take ownership of. You get a chance to do one last act. Do it well, do it thoughtfully, right? And again, when you die, your stuff is going to go somewhere. Do you want to have any say in that or not? I can just tell my family my wishes. Here's some legal truth for you. Your family may not get a choice based on state law where it goes if you didn't put a document in there. So you can tell your kids all you want, but if you don't have a legal document dictating where that's going to go, they may not have the ability to do what you want. Give them that power and that authority so that they can execute your wishes. And like I've already mentioned, the kids are going to disagree with what to do with it anyways, because one person was close, and then they'll resent each other forever. And then I love this one too. What do I care? I'll be gone. I've heard a few people say this. 1 Timothy 5:8. If anyone does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own family, they have disowned the faith and are worse than an unbeliever. Ooh, that's fighting words right there. Here, what I want to, again, encourage you, and I've sort of been saying this already, but this is something you need to own, right? This is your last act. It's not your children's. Don't abdicate it and say, kids, figure it out. You have a chance to take spiritual ownership of what your closing service will be, what your last sort of communication to your friends and family will be, to have, again, this last physical act of what happens to your property. And you should really take ownership of that and take it seriously. And then the last sort of piece I'm going to say, and then I'll have two sort of funny slides which are also true, and then wrap up. But an imperfect will is better than no will. A funeral outline is better than nothing. Get a first draft complete, focusing on what you do have clarity on. You can always update the other parts later. So many people say, well, I don't know what hymns to do. I don't know what songs. I don't know what I want to do with this weird car that I've inherited over here. And so then you don't write anything. But I'm telling you, the next generation would appreciate a half-baked will with something in it, and a funeral plan that has a few points of clarity than nothing at all. So please take this seriously, get something started, and then fix it next year when you realize how bad the first draft was. Now, this is pretty hard to read, but I want you to know this is actually for one of my family members, and this is why people invite me to parties. Because when we have a birthday party, I say, okay, everybody, what are your burial plans? What do you want for your funeral service? And, what have you thought about for your last will? And for those of you who know Dick and Marcia Prim, my in-laws, I actually really do this. So sorry in advance to them. But it's really actually helpful. When we're all together, we have this conversation, and it's actually not threatening. It's not this big ordeal where you're sitting down with a lawyer and pencil and paper, and now this is forever. It's just having an informal conversation of, hey, and it's also really helpful when somebody else dies to then, after the service, sort of debrief. Hey, what was good about that? What did you like? What did you not like? And to start to jot those down can be really helpful. And what I love about this, and I don't think you can actually read it, but this is my mom here, and she has perfect clarity. She's been a Coca-Cola person her whole life. And so do you know what the most important thing for her funeral is? No Pepsi products. She has made clear she will come back from the grave and haunt me if I serve Pepsi. So you'll see in all caps, no Pepsi products allowed, must serve peanut butter, fudge, and Coca-Cola. She also had clarity, I have to play Helen Reddy, I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar, and serve tasty hors d'oeuvres, no pizza. Now, it's sort of funny, but the fact of the matter is when my siblings get together to plan the funeral, we'll know as long as we've checked these boxes, whatever hymns we pick, it's going to be fine. She won't be rolling in her grave. It actually de-stresses the whole conversation. We can all chuckle about what we have clarity on, and we'll fill in the rest. It's fine. And then this is now my one of my siblings. And here, again, they said something very different. So, for organ donation, right? Donate anything that they will take. Donate everything else to science. But only if there's no fee. He's super cheap. So he made clear that if to donate him to science is going to cost anything, we better not do it or he'll come back for us. And again, it's sort of funny, but now we really do know what his wishes are, and now we can also get legal documents that reflect those wishes, and it doesn't have to be something super over the top. And then for the service, the only thing he had clarity on is everybody has to wear a tie, and he said male and female, because he just loves ties, and he has this huge collection of ties. So everybody who comes in is going to wear a tie, and we'll have all of his old ties we're trying to get rid of that everybody's going to wear as they come in. And again, I'm kidding, but that's what was important to him. Not the hymn, not the message, not any of that, and that's fine. We now have it recorded. So I wanted you to show that this doesn't have to be a heavy conversation, but to just even have this outline, you can imagine now when we do funeral planning, it's going to be a lot easier to proceed. We've got something to start with, and we can fill in the rest. All right, so the basic process, and this is my last slide, and I really do want you all to do this between this week and next week. Create a top 5 priority list. Kids and family, alleviating poverty, church and faith, environment, politics, alma mater. Doesn't matter, but have clarity of what's important, and then you can start to make sure these documents reflect it. 2, I want you to compare how that list compares to how you're living today. Don't just wait till your will to do it right. Be thinking about if you're doing it now. And then find your current documents. Where is that will? Have you looked at it in 10 years? Does it still have your ex-wife in there? Very common, by the way. Really awkward then when you die. Find it. And then likewise, do you have a funeral service plan? Anything thought about it? Any burial plan? Anything at all? Pull that together. And then I'd encourage you to consult with some experts. So we're going to have Julia here who's going to talk in a little bit. That's your first consult. But we can also talk about it more. And again, especially with the funeral plan, believe it or not, I enjoy having these conversations. I will gladly meet with you now to start stenciling out something basic so that your kids, again, will have something. And I highly recommend you talk to your spouse. They are an expert in what you want. And so I'd highly encourage you to talk to them about it. And then review with your family regularly. And again, Julia's going to talk about this too. But if you have a will and nobody knows where it is, you don't actually have a will, right? If you have a power of attorney and the power of attorney doesn't have that document, you don't have a power of attorney. So that's why it's important to review this with your family, number 1, so that when you die it's not a surprise, and 2, so everybody knows where it is. Otherwise you wasted all of that energy for nothing. All right, so that's going to be the high-level plan. And so now we're going to switch over to Julia, who's going to now bring it really concrete, starting out with the living wills and the power of attorney for today. And then next week we're going to dive into the last will and testament and some of the trickier, more technical issues. Make sense? So Julia, come on up. All right, I don't think we could hear you. So she said she only brought 20 copies.
Share. Okay, you guys. Sorry I didn't bring enough. I will have more next week. Yeah, it is what it is. I don't like handouts, by the way, because I think I used to be a teacher, and that was the number one thing. When you gave a handout, that's all they would pay attention to is the handout, and they would stop listening. So. But the first document I'm going to go over is called the Power of Attorney for Property. It's all financial power of attorney. Powers of attorney are only in use while you're living. A lot of people do not understand that. They think when you pass that this power of attorney is still in effect, and it's not. Once you pass, this becomes invalid. So that's why you need to have a will. So, power of attorney for property. It's very important. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but raise your hand if you do have a power of attorney for property. Excellent, excellent. It's very important that you review these, I'd say at least every 5 years. Many attorneys say review it every year. And the forms, these are statutory forms, meaning that the state legislatures actually came up with this form, and so it's recognizable anywhere in the state of Illinois. Illinois requires that a power of attorney be witnessed by one impartial party, meaning it cannot be a spouse, a child, or anybody who is named as the agent. It must be witnessed in front of one impartial party and a notary public, all at the same time. On our forms here, we actually put 2 witnesses because in other states, they require 2 witnesses and a notary. So we always do the 2 witnesses and a notary just to make sure you're safe everywhere, okay? So in Illinois, the newest forms look like this. On the very first page, there's a big notice, and that's the notice to the person who is assigning a power of attorney agent, because they want to make sure you understand what you're signing and the import of it. because you really are giving a lot of power to somebody else. So you have to think a lot about who you would name as your power of attorney agent. If you're married, most people name their spouse. But if you're not married, or if you don't have a significant other, who are you going to name? Let's say you have 3 children. A lot of people want to name all of their kids at the same time. Well, that's what people used to do. And Illinois law says, no, we're not going to allow that anymore because there were too many fights. So, yeah, one person at a time, that's how it is. So you name the person that you trust the most, okay? If that person is unavailable, it goes to the next person in line. So you can make a list of, 20 people if you wanted to, because it'll keep going down the line. But they want to make sure you understand what you are signing, and they want you to initial this very first page. Then on the second page, you are actually saying who you are and who you are putting as your agent.
Sorry, can you actually make explicit what the power of attorney does and why it's important? Like, what are the contexts where you want that?
Well, that's what I'm going to go through this. Thanks, Eric. We're on our way there. Right. So these newer forms, they do require that you put the address and the phone number of your agent. So if you have an older form, that information may not be there anymore. And now that people use the same phone number forever, it's such a nice thing because you don't have to keep updating these forms. As long as that phone number stays the same, then it's great. It's an easy way to get a hold of the person. It's easily identifiable to be that person with that phone number. So here, you are giving them a lot of powers, or you can limit the powers. So it goes through a long line of lists that you can think, like everything you can think of: real estate transactions, bank accounts, IRS forms, changing your beneficiary on your IRA, all sorts of things, business operations, basically anything you can think of that has to do with money, real estate, personal property, selling your vehicle, anything that you can think of. So a lot of people, what they do is they may have one person that they want to be in charge of their bank accounts, but they have a different person that they want to be in charge of their business operations. So you can actually have 2 separate powers of attorney if they are for different purposes, okay? So a lot of people do that because your spouse may be the one that you want to be having control of all your finances at home, but maybe you want your business partner to have all the power at your business, okay? If it's not your spouse. So on this document, you can limit the powers, or you can just give them a general power of attorney that says they can do anything that they want. Now, the key is, when do you want this power of attorney to start? When does it trigger? So when I prepare for my clients, many times they have a preconceived notion that, hey, I don't want anyone making any decisions for my finances unless a doctor declares that I'm incompetent and I can't make my own decisions. And they come in there very strong with that opinion, and I completely understand it because I'm that way too. But the truth is, I advise them to say that it is effective upon execution, meaning as soon as you sign it, then you can dictate to somebody else to do something for you. And why? Because it's out of convenience. Because many times, you're going to want this in place when you are competent. When you do have the ability to do something, it's just you can't for some reason. So you're in the hospital, and you need somebody to go write a check on your behalf. You can't write for some reason. You can just say, hey, Charlotte, can you come over here? Can you write a check for me? Can you do this? And they can go to your bank account. They can sell your car. They can do whatever you dictate them to do. So you instruct them to do it, okay? So that's why I believe it's important to have it now in place so that you can tell them what to do. And then, at such time, if you ever were to become incompetent, it continues, and they know what they're supposed to be doing. So that is why I say, don't wait for a doctor to say that you're incompetent, because it really holds up your finances. Some things have to be done right away, and it can take a long time for that whole process to happen, okay? So after you say it's going to start right now, then you can also expand what kinds of things that they can do. And you can specifically state certain things because you want to make sure they understand that they have this basically unlimited power regarding your financials. So in my format, I do put that they're allowed to give gifts because I want to make sure that whomever has done their tax returns in the past can continue to do so. They know that every year they give a certain amount to certain charities, and they want to make sure that that continues. So I put it in here explicitly because I want to make sure the family understands they want everything to continue the way it was while they're in the hospital or when they're unable to do these things themselves. I also add digital assets. That's something that the old forms do not have. So these new power of attorneys, if you haven't done one in the past 5 years or so, digital assets are very important. Many people only have their statements online. And, how does your family know how to get to it? Karen's family is not going to have any problem whatsoever, are they, Karen? I'm going to get to you 1 second. But yeah, so make sure you have information about digital assets. It also includes like cryptocurrency, all of that. So you're covered. Your agent has the right to delegate certain powers. They can talk to an attorney. They can spend your money on an attorney, that sort of thing, to help them out. You can limit that if you didn't want them to do that. My form also says that the agent can take a fee, a reasonable fee. Many people don't like that, so they cross it out. But I say, come on, people. If somebody's acting on your behalf, they may be spending hours and hours that they had not anticipated it, and it is a job, let me tell you. And then here you can say when you actually want it to terminate. So usually it's open-ended. You can have one for a limited time. If you're going on vacation or something and you want to name your daughter just for that certain time when you're going to be out of state with your spouse or something like that, you can do it that way. I put so it goes on until a court determines that you need a guardian in place. So what is a guardianship? That means that you're so mentally incapacitated that even the doctors and other people that were working with you, they may say that this power of attorney is not enough, because usually what happens is the person starts doing things that are not in their best interest. Like, nobody has deemed them incompetent, and so they're starting to do things that, giving money away to scammers and that sort of thing. And during that time period, they can try to revoke this power of attorney, and so the safest bet is to go to court and get a guardian in place for that person so that this is revoked and everybody understands that this person cannot make their own financial decisions. So that's what I put. I put, when a court appoints a guardian, this is done, because you don't want to have, it could be a different person, and you don't want all these people with authority running around. And in my document, I put, hey, but if a guardian does have to be appointed, I would prefer to have the person that I said would be my power of attorney agent also be my guardian, because I trust them. So you're stating, now this is when it gets tricky, is when, the person is acting not in their best interest. They start getting mad at their agent. They don't want the agent doing whatever they're doing that is actually in that person's best interest. So sometimes the power of attorney, even though they've been deemed to be the person preferenced by the principal to be the guardian, they may not want to do it because it becomes so hostile. And so there's also what's called a public guardian, so you don't have to have somebody in your family to be the guardian, because if you still just want to be the family member and not the person who is always arguing with that person, you don't have to be the guardian. Any questions about this property power of attorney? Yes, sir.
Is it usually an attorney if it's somebody outside the family?
For as a public guardian, or if it's somebody outside the family, there are, yes, yeah, there are people who are actually, that's their job, is to be the public guardian. And I believe they are all attorneys. But we also have other types of professionals who are counselors and that sort of thing, who will take on that guardianship position. And they're usually not as expensive. Well, and it's also nice to have somebody private and not the public guardian. You don't have a lot of control when it's the public guardian. And also, that's when there's really not sufficient funds, is when it goes to public guardian. So yeah, preference is to have somebody you know. If not, there are different counselors who will do it. But yeah. Correct. Yes, yes, yes. Power of attorney is called the agent. Instead of, you don't want to confuse it with attorney. They call it power of attorney, but it is the agent. Any other questions? Oh.
How do you get rid of a bad power of attorney?
How do you get rid of it? Good question. So you have to, you're announcing that you're revoking your power of attorney, correct? So if you have a power of attorney who's your agent, you say, I revoke it. You put it in writing. You make sure that anybody who's gotten a copy of this gets your letter of revocation. I always say, do it in front of a notary so that everybody knows that. But yeah. And if they continue to act after you've given them that notice, then you can take them to court. They are committing fraud if you have revoked it and you were in your right mind at the time that you did it.
Either a date or a reason when it ends?
Correct. Yeah, in the actual document, you can have a limited time or reason, yes.
I had one of my daughters at one time when she was changing schools and she went to Europe, and so I had to negotiate with the colleges, and I had a power of attorney, but it was limited to that act.
Exactly, yes. You can have it limited to a specific purpose and a specific time. So you can really, that's why you can have more than one at the same time, because yes, she still probably wanted somebody for the general as well. Any other questions or comments about the power of attorney for property? I should also mention the last page of it is a notice to the actual person who's supposed to be acting as your agent. So it gives them more information on what they're supposed to legally be doing. Because a lot of people don't understand, hey, I've been named as an agent. What am I allowed to do and what am I not allowed to do? So this sets forth the rules so, they're not questioning. Like one of the big things is do not commingle the funds. I mean, we all think that's logical, but a lot of younger people may not realize, hey, they said to take out $1,000 cash. I took it out. What should I do with it? So then they give that person some of the money, and the person says, oh, well, just hold on to the rest. Hold on to the $300. Okay, so I go and I put it in my bank account. Well, that's commingling right there. You cannot commingle the funds. Everybody hears that word commingle when it comes to divorce. So yeah, keep everything separate because you will get in big trouble. Any questions about that, about the rules? Yes? That is correct. Yes. Yes. If you have a financial advisor, you want to send it to them. As the attorney who helps people, if they tell me, yeah, can you send this to my financial advisor? I will. Because we always, scan it in or whatever, and then they just need a copy of it. They don't need the original. You only get one original most of the time, so you're going to want to hold on to that original. You go into the bank, they scan it in, and they keep a copy. But yeah, for power of attorney for financial, yes, you send it in to your financial advisor, administrators on your account, go to your bank, give it to your bank. But make sure you give it to your agent as well, because like Eric said, if you don't give one to your agent, you really don't have one, because they may not even know that they were appointed. All right, so the next one I have is, oh, yes, sir.
One thing I did on mine, I put $5,000 in the lockbox and told my daughter, who was the financial power of attorney, that not to tell anybody about it, that she was to use that for incidental expenses that come up after I pass while she's waiting for everything else to get ironed out.
I love that. I love that. Yes, and I've had other people say that to me, and I said, make sure that you tell one other person, just in case. Well, and I know she has a way to get into the safe, correct?
She's on my lockbox,
Oh,
and she can go to it at any time.
perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay,
Plus, I have a safe at home with the same thing.
okay. You're very prepared, yes. No, that's wonderful. And I ask my clients, and I put a note in my file of where they're going to keep their will, where they're going to keep these things, so that if their kids do call me, I can tell them, hey, you know, your parent did give me this information. I don't know if they moved the documents, but they did tell me when we were in the appointment that they were going to keep it in this green folder, you know, in the closet. Okay? So while I have you, Karen, I want to quickly go over this. So, Eric was talking about, you know, making sure to speak with your kids and let them know where your documents are and how to get a hold of everything. Well, Karen brought this with, and I'm so glad that she did. It's called a grab and go, and I don't know how many of you know Sonia Reese, but she has done many, many, you know, presentations and seminars where she helps people prepare these grab and go binders, and the whole family knows about this binder and where to find the binder. And this has everything that your family could possibly need in all types of situations, whether it's you're in the hospital or whether you've passed. Here it has all the information, all of your account information, how to get into your online accounts, you know, who your administrator is for your IRA and all of those, you know, most recent statements, your bank account statements. It's so helpful to the families. You would not believe. I mean, it saves so much money that they have to spend on attorneys. It is really, really great. It's the best thing that has ever come up, and I can't believe that, you know, when I was in law school, nobody ever talked about doing something like that, but it's a godsend for real.
If you have one like that, and then you have to change your password, but you haven't put it in there, is there some way that they can get into the accounts without the password?
While you're living with the power of attorney for property, they can. If you've passed, it depends. They may have to open probate in order to get a court order to get that online access. But it all depends on what the account is and how flexible they are, but many times they're too strict, so.
If they have access to your email, they'll just reset the password.
Okay.
Oh, that's true, yes. Yeah, unless they've passed and they've been notified.
I put all of my passwords into the notes part of my phone, and my daughter knows access to my phone, so she can get all my passwords there.
I love it. Yes, you are definitely prepared. So yeah, that's a good idea. Put it in your phone, and you know there are all sorts of encrypted password functions now that you can have, but you need to make sure that your person is able to get access to that to have the access. Yeah, the fingerprint and face could be issues for sure.
If I can just make one last comment before I know we got to move on. Just a reminder, 90% of late, you can no longer legally get that document signed. So do it early, before it's awkward, before it's painful, before it's traumatic. Do it now.
Can you say that over the microphone for the people at home, please?
I heard him. I think everybody heard him. Oh, there really are people at home. Oh. Okay, so yes, do it now so that the person that you've named as the agent can start making some helpful decisions with you, and therefore when the time comes when you actually can't make them, you've already entrusted them and you have already established that relationship, so it is not so hostile. And yes,
You can talk about how to make your stuff so you don't have to go through probate,
Well,
because I think that's an important thing, is to learn how to.
that's what I'm talking about next week. Next week is all about probate. So today we're talking about things to do while you're the powers of attorney are while living, and next week we're going to talk about how to prepare to make sure your assets are covered when you pass, and how to avoid probate is a big part of it. We're going to talk about wills and trusts and the different kinds of trusts, and how to transfer your real estate on death. There are different ways to do it. You can put real estate into a trust now. You can do a deed that says that your property is going to transfer on the date of your death. So there are all sorts of things that you can do to avoid probate. Again, it doesn't make us attorneys out of work, because we still help people through their estate administration, but it does save money for not having to go to court for probate. Yes.
Can an executor, while you're living, okay, so
No,
put all this in, they
there's
can't
no
change-
executor
Okay, but can anybody who's named in that change what has already been written
in your will.
in your estate planning or anything? If they're, if you sign them over to that, can they change it? Like in my, I guess what I'm asking for is my situation, my father is still alive, but my parents put their trust together before she passed. So all of that is there. Now, if they there's other people involved, I don't know who they are, but I do have a family member that has said to me, oh, I have power, so I'm not giving you anything. And I just want to know, is it possible that they can change that even though my dad is still alive?
So you're saying your dad is the trustee of the trust.
Mm-hmm.
He was the grantor of a trust, and he no longer has capacity?
No, he does.
He does have
So I'm just
capacity.
wondering, my brother is the one that's saying, I can take this from you because when dad passes or whatever, but I'm just wondering if they can change it right now. Like if you sign over your probate thing or whatever they signed and you say, you're going to be my guardian while I'm in the
So
hospital or whatever,
it would be
can they
highly-
go and change things is what I'm saying.
No,
Does the
it would
power
be
of
highly
attorney give
unu-
them that much power to
No, not your
change
estate plan.
what your wishes
No.
were?
No, it would be highly unlikely that somebody that you have named would be able to take over your wishes while you had capacity. So no, that would most likely be considered fraud, and you can take them to court. However, there are ways around it. Yes, you can have your estate plan changed by your guardian, but they do have to go to court, and there is, an attorney or someone else is appointed as a guardian ad litem who can advise the court whether they believe that it's in the best interest of that person who has lost capacity. So there are ways to do it, and usually it's because, they had some really old estate planning done, and it was going to go to some people that, don't exist anymore, and those family members are far removed, and, so there are ways to change it, but no, somebody should not just be, and yeah, that sounds like, that's typical family, yeah, that's what siblings do. They make you feel like they can do something that they can't. It's like a threat in order to get something that they want. So, yeah. Yes?
Let's actually move on to the next document, I think. One last question, but then after that, we'll move on.
Are you going to talk about medical power of attorneys at a later date, or is now the time?
Now's the time.
Perfect
That's
transition.
right. What? Okay.
When my wife was on her deathbed with cancer and ready to go into hospice, I asked the nurses, is her medical power of attorney, am I able to say that, when to end life? And they said, no, as long as she is cogent and can make her own decisions, the power of attorney is not active. Is that correct?
It depends on what so it depends on when you had your power of attorney done. So they do say different things, okay? So it may depend on, and a lot of times hospitals do have different policies and people have fought about this. But in the new forms of power of attorney for healthcare, you can say when you actually want it to start, and the most restrictive is when a doctor says you're incompetent and you can't make your own decisions. But in this newer form, it also says, you can have the most restrictive, but the least restrictive says that your agent can make decisions for you starting now and may continue, but I may continue to make them if I want to. So if you had marked that, I don't think that they could argue with you that whether or not you could make that decision. But however,
We agreed that she didn't want to go into hospice. We agreed she didn't want to go into hospice, and she ended up taking the life support away before it happened because she wanted to die in the hospital rather than in a nursing home or somewhere. But that was her decision, and I knew what she wanted. We both had do not resuscitate forms on file with the hospital.
so yeah, so if they were still able to communicate with your wife and she was still able to say what she wanted, then they're gonna defer to your wife first, yeah. Yeah, which it should be correct. But yeah, you can mark on here that, this is telling the healthcare providers that you really, 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 really trust this person. If you're telling them that they can actually make decisions for you starting now, but I can make them if I want to. So most of the time I don't advise that one. I advise the hybrid, which says that they can make decisions for me only when I cannot make them for myself, but starting now, for purposes of assisting me with my healthcare plans and decisions, my agent shall have complete access to my medical and mental health records and the authority to share that with others and the ability to communicate with my physician and family members. So that's a hybrid. So that's what I usually recommend for most situations. However, that third one, the most lenient, I do recommend for older couples who are in the hospital a lot, because if you go in there for a procedure that has been planned, and then while they have you on the operating table, they find something else, they find something that could help you. However, they don't have to do it right then and there, but they could go ask your agent what you would like. And then perhaps you can, save some time, have that done then, not have to go through the surgery again, not having to, open you up or whatever it was. It would probably be in your best interest that they continue to do something and take care of it then instead of waiting on it. So healthcare power of attorney, you want to make sure you really trust your agent. Again, you can name successors, the people who, all your alternates to be your agent. And then not only do you need to tell everybody when you want them to be able to start to act, but then you also instruct them how you feel about staying on life-sustaining treatment so they're aware. So on these power of attorney forms, it's an optional, but most people do fill this out. Because the choices are quality of life is more important than the length of my life if I'm unconscious and my attending physician believes, in accordance with reasonable medical standards, that I will not wake up or recover my ability to think, communicate with my family and friends, and experience my surroundings. I do not want treatments to prolong my life or delay my death, but I do want treatment or care to make me comfortable and to relieve me of pain. So that is the choice, directing your agent, telling them that, hey, I do not want to stay on life-supporting treatment if I'm not going to be able to do anything, if I'm not able to even talk to you. But the second choice is staying alive is more important to me than anything, no matter how sick I am, how much I'm suffering, the cost of the procedures, or how unlikely my chances for recovery are. I want my life to be prolonged to the greatest extent possible in accordance with reasonable medical standards. And 99% of the people choose number 1 and not number 2. So it's very important that if you do feel strongly one way or the other that you mark it. Otherwise, you are just leaving it in the hands of your power of attorney. Now, these are just directions to them. They don't necessarily have to follow what you've said. And that is why we have the living will or declaration. So we have, I know I did not pass these out, did I? Okay. So the living will is, yeah, you can go ahead and pass it. I've got healthcare power of attorney forms and the living will. So the living will, most people get it confused with a living trust or a will, but a living will is also called a declaration. I don't know why they call it a living will because it is very confusing, but it is your will, it's your free will. You're telling your doctors, hey, I don't want to stay on life-sustaining treatment under certain circumstances. Even if my healthcare power of attorney wants to keep me alive, if it's under these certain circumstances, you have the authority to let me go. So this it takes it out of the hands of your power of attorney for healthcare because sometimes it does become a very difficult decision for them and they don't want to make the wrong decision. So this helps them because now the doctor actually has a little bit more authority because you're directing the doctor how you feel. So when you go to the hospital for any types of procedures, they usually ask you, hey, do you have a healthcare power of attorney and do you have a living will or advanced directives? So,
Are these forms online?
So you can find the forms online, but you're going to want to make sure they're Illinois specific. But yeah, I'm going to bring a ton more next week, you guys. I'm so sorry. Like, they're like, there could be as little as 5 people, or I was like, well, I don't want to make a bunch of copies and then, but I'm so glad there are more people.
Can you actually hear me? Okay. So one also from like a pastoral perspective, here's something else where when I was a hospital chaplain, that living will is so helpful. And Julia already mentioned this, but I just want to hit it home. Your kids are not going to want to be the one who pulled the plug too early. They are going to have guilt, they're going to have remorse, they're going to have siblings who think it should have gone longer. It is an incredibly emotionally difficult decision. God forbid any of us are in that place. So that living will is such a powerful help to your next generation because you have now said, this is when I want it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but there's like a spot to sort of free form, write your wishes, which can also be helpful. So like in mine, I think I wrote, there are things much worse than dying young, please pull the plug, right? And like that can sort of be informative then for who's going to have that decision. When in doubt, lean into it a little bit early. For me, my wife, on the other hand, is like, if there's any chance, don't you dare pull that plug, right? Like, no, I don't want to be a vegetable, but if there's a chance, don't pull the plug. And again, it doesn't always fit in one of those 3 boxes. So it just gives you a chance to now write that down, and it helps the next generation who's got to make that difficult decision have a little more context.
Yes. And one of the key things about this is after you have these powers of attorney in place, you need to sit down with your family and talk to all of them about it and what your wishes are and how you see things going in case something were to happen to you and you were unable to make decisions, how you would like to see things go, because that's so important. Eric touched on it earlier that sometimes, you're closer with one relative than another, and so that person may be the only one who knows what's going on, and so it's very important that you have your whole family together and you make it an open discussion, and it doesn't need to be this taboo kind of thing. It's really something that they're going to be glad that you talked about. They're going to be relieved. Any questions about any of those documents? Yes.
One example of why it's important not to let your kids divide among themselves and have problems. I have an uncle, he's dead now, but his sister refused to talk to him for 30 years because they took a ham to one funeral and not to another for relatives. The people are crazy. So you got to say what you want, and then that's what will happen.
So quick time check, we've got 10 minutes left. And then what I can't promise that we'll be able to do this, but what I'm wondering about is if we can actually try to get a notary public here next week so that if you do go home and fill this out, it'll be real easy to get 2 witnesses and have a little signing table in the back. So just know if you have this, go ahead and fill it out for next week. And the will, you're going to not want to do that in just 1 week. We're not promising that. But for the power of attorneys, truly, have these conversations this week, get it filled out, and next week we'll have a notary here, already been promised.
And I'm a notary too, Eric.
Perfect. Well, I didn't want to, while you're in front, be like, I think we'll get a notary, but we've got one.
So the forms, the actual forms change, I would say maybe, sometimes they're 10 years, sometimes they're 5 years. Recently, it's like the healthcare power of attorney. I was asking, how often do you think they change?
Oh, my God, you're talking about state statute?
Yes.
Who can predict? I mean, it's when some bad event happens that gets a lot of publicity, that's when a state legislator, proposes a bill to modify something. So, yeah, it could be next year, it could be 10 years.
Yes. It's a very erratic. So these healthcare power of attorneys, those are the ones that have been changing a lot lately. During COVID, a lot of issues came up because you didn't have access to the hospital, or you didn't have access to get the healthcare power of attorney, the original form. So there was a case where somebody went to the hospital, showed that they were an agent, and the doctors refused to recognize it because it was not the original. So now the law says, guess what? You can have it on your phone, and they have to recognize it. They have to, because it caused so much turmoil. I mean, come on. Why would you rather not have somebody to talk to? I just don't understand.
You can say it from there. Does the form stand even if the statute changes?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, you don't have to keep updating it every time the form changes. However, it may have new things in there that you really would like to, So, like the new forms have a new portion that says, I elect to delay any type of revocation of my health care power of attorney for 30 days. That way you don't make a decision in the hospital to revoke your power of attorney. And then all of a sudden, the doctors and nurses don't have anyone to talk to. So that's something that we've been advised to have our clients check the box on, because that's a newer thing that happened over the past 5 years. Yes, sir?
Real quick, he asked, if you go into surgery and you're healthy and fine, and then, what was the second part? And you're in general anesthesia, does the power of attorney kick in?
I would say yes, if any decisions had to be made during that time. I guess it would depend if it's such a huge decision where they could wake you up and ask you, then they're likely going to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll also say this, when I was a chaplain in the hospital, that was one of the roles of the chaplain. So you didn't have to have a lawyer do it. The chaplain came around and said, hey, you're about to go under general anesthesia, and we don't have a power of attorney for you yet. Please fill this out and name somebody before you go under. So when they have that option, the hospital usually requires you to have that filled out before they'll put you under general anesthesia, specifically because it does apply.
Yes. Any questions until next week? Now, next week, we're going to have a lot more to talk about. Yeah.
If you're literally using a notary public next week, folks are going to want to bring a photo ID, because what the notary public is saying is, I know this person, and this is the person that I saw sign the document. And if it's somebody that, if I'm the notary and I don't know that person, I'd want to see a photo ID, because that's what I'm verifying for everybody in the general public, is that is this person.
Thank you for stating that. So yes, if you are wanting something notarized next week, definitely bring your ID because nobody will notarize for you unless they know who you are. Unless they personally, I mean, if they personally know for who you are, then they don't require an ID if you're an attorney. But anyone who is a notary public who is not an attorney and they don't know you, or even if they do know you, they are required to not only take your ID, but they're required to put all this information into a notary book. And so it's just important that you have your identification with you because as an attorney, you know, I'm not really your attorney, so I want to make sure that I am notarizing for the right person because I could be legally liable if I am out there notarizing and all of a sudden I helped you put a power of attorney in place for somebody else. Oops, yeah, I don't want to do that.
One last comment about that, because we are going to have a notary here next week. Don't sign it till you're here. The notary can't say that you signed it if they don't physically see you do it. True story, I made that mistake. I went to my lawyer with it filled out with the notary, and they had to print out a new draft because I had already signed it, so.
Oh, okay, and one last thing, those healthcare power of attorneys don't require a notary, so those are very easy for you to fill out. You know, I'll bring more next week. You can look at those. If you want to sign those then, you know, I can be a witness for you too. But yeah, you just need a witness. It just needs to be an impartial witness, somebody who's not going to take care of your health care, somebody who's not one of your agents and not a family member. Okay, so next week it'll be exciting. We're going to talk about wills, how to set everything up to avoid probate, how to avoid estate tax if that's one of your things. If you have over $4 million, you don't want to owe money to the state of Illinois. Ugh. Yuck. And then federal tax, we're not sure what's happening, but it could go down to an exemption of like $7 million if it doesn't sunset. Right now it's so large that most people don't have to worry about federal estate tax, but that's coming back as well. All right, it was nice to meet all of you. All right.
If you don't mind, let's go ahead and close in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you so much for, again, the interesting conversation that we've had today, the opportunity to learn about something new. Lord, I pray that you would be with us this week as we reflect on how we want our last act to look like and what we want it to say. God, I pray that this would be a spiritual and soulful conversation and that your will would be done throughout. In your name we pray, amen.